Hello, and welcome to Making Known the Unknown, Series 3, Obtaining Your Passport into Forever. I am your host, Tina Tarryk, and with me are my panel of experts, Sidney Schwartz, middle school teacher and Bible researcher. Welcome, Sidney.
Hi, Tina.
Reverend Hewitt, founder and pastor of Gifts of the Spirit Church, and medium. Welcome, Carl.
Thank you.
Okay, and welcome to our viewers. We will be live for 1 hour. If you have any comments, questions, or suggestions, don't hesitate to give us a call. The number should be on the screen shortly. If Holly would put that up. I believe it's 889-1728. Don't be shy. What we're going to do first tonight is I'm going to share with you a little bit of an introduction that Sidney Schwartz has put together that we think best explains Reverend Hewitt's mediumship and what happens when a medium goes into trance and receives the information that they do. I don't want to give away the clip. And it also talks about the mission statement or the focus of the show. And from this point on, we're going to have this clip be a regular part of the beginning of the show, because we find that people who are new to this or people who only hear part of this may not have the full picture. So we'll run that every week so that all of you will slowly become used to knowing exactly what our show is about. Okay, so if we could have that clip, please.
In the Bible, Paul explains that everyone has two bodies, a physical body and a spiritual body. Mediums use their spiritual bodies when they act as a communication bridge between the physical and spirit worlds. As a spirit speaks, mediums hear the information using the ears of their spiritual bodies, then repeat the information to other physical people. Mediumship is synonymous with the biblical term, gifts of the Spirit. The focus of our show, Making Known the Unknown, is to provide knowledge through the use of Reverend Hewitt's mediumship and Sidney Schwartz's research. The Bible contains the history of psychic events, along with man-made doctrines created by priests centuries ago. This show will explore the untruths which the Bible entrenched into our society. By uncovering these untruths, we encourage people everywhere to think for themselves with a critical mind.
Okay, we're back. So you've seen that clip, and hopefully this will help some of our viewers or give them somewhat of a guide as to exactly what goes on in the show and how our two experts contribute to making this show a whole. With that, I'm going to turn it over to Reverend Hewitt, who has some things he'd like to share with us that have both come up recently and that he has been made known recently.
Well, since we started the show, I think it was back in June this past year, well, it seems that we let the cat out of the bag with some of our shows. There's so many people in this area was not unaware that the cemetery down here in Waterford on Route 32 has a tombstone there, and it listed several pastors, several ministers that were burned at the stake. Everybody thinks that only happened in Salem, Massachusetts, and other places on the planet, but it happened right here in this area. And I went to visit that cemetery many times because I was told several years ago that by spirit, having the gift of clairaudient, and they told me that there was a marker in this area, and they told me what cemetery it was, and I went and I walked back and forth until I found it. And so they said it looked similar to the Washington Monument, and it didn't take me very long to find it, and because I was always interested in these places, you know. And I found it, and I felt very sad when I saw this particular stone, and it said burned at the stake. What a horrible death. And I always wondered which was the worst, nailed on the cross or burned at the stake. And it was after that that I studied an awful lot about Joan of Arc, burned at the stake. And so I've sent a lot of people over there, and everyone was shocked to see that here in this area, you see. And so after reporting that in this area after we started the show, it seems that someone in the area got kind of worried about it. And I don't know who the pastor is of the church, but this past week I heard someone call me, and they didn't want to be recognized, but there's rumors that they don't want people to know about it, so they're talking about knocking the stone over and then burying it right there so that people will not see that stone, and in other words, hiding it. So like so much of this work has been hidden, covered up, so people will not realize that these people were really burned at the stake in this area. So I went back there with my camera and took some more pictures because I was afraid this could be done before I was able to take these pictures. And while I was there, I sat down and meditated, and a voice came to me, and it was a voice of someone whose name was on there, and I don't bother asking questions. I went beyond that, as long as I could hear them talking to me. And they said that every name on there, all of the men's names on there, all of the ministers, they were all spiritualist ministers. And in those days, a spiritualist church would have to have a medium, just like they do today. All spiritualist churches has to have a medium to have a spiritualist church. I'm a medium, and when my church was organized, I was the medium. Prior to that, I was the pastor of the spiritualist church in Willimantic, and I was the pastor of other spiritualist churches. And I had so much trouble with people working together that I really threw up my hands for quite some time, and the voices of spirit kept behind me and everything else. And finally I said, if I go back into this work, I'm going to become independent. I'm not going to be bothered with the organizations any longer. And they wouldn't leave me alone. They wanted me to form a church, and they wanted me to call it Gifts of the Spirit Church as found in the Bible. That's why my church was organized. And I went kicking and screaming, and finally it was organized, and I followed their advice. Even to the bylaws came from the other dimension, not from me. And so when they told me that there was this marker and these people were burned at the stake in this area, you know, I had a lot of trouble believing that. So when we talked about it on this show, it seemed that it shook up some people in this area. So now this is the message that I really would like to get out to some people here in the area, because I'm planning on leaving and going to North Carolina because of people wanting me down there to open a center. I would hope that somebody in this area would go there and see if they could find living relatives here connected with the people that's listed on that tombstone, and let them know what is rumored to do with that stone, because to me it's important that stone stays there.
I believe we have a clip of that stone so our viewers can see.
Yes.
In case they're not exactly familiar with the location, they may
Please.
remember the stone because it's quite unusual.
It's a Union Cemetery on Route 32.
Okay, if we could put that picture up.
I think it's very important that that stone remains there.
Okay,
Located
Union
in Waterford,
Cemetery of
Connecticut,
Waterford.
along Route 32. There is a large tombstone with a long list of names inscribed on it. The first one clearly states, Edward, burned at the stake, 1612. Spirit has told Reverend Hewitt that Edward was a medium who was silenced by a local Connecticut church.
So for those of you out there who may have seen this stone in passing, and your family members are possibly listed on that stone, or maybe they're not even in this local area, but you think they might have been in this area at one time, make sure you contact them.
There's got to be somebody in this area connected. There's a lot of family members in this area. There's got to be. There's a lot of people by that same name there.
Now, how could, and this is a question I have, and I'm sure other people would have, how could someone be allowed to bury a stone, alter a stone, or move a stone?
It's done in the night.
Oh, I see.
You see, they go there. They would go there and dig a hole, right so where the stone is. Dig a hole, and they drop the stone over it and cover it up. And people go in there. They think there was a fresh grave. Nobody would ever ask questions.
So they'll maybe call it vandalism or something like that, to that effect?
No, they wouldn't call it anything.
Okay.
They would just think it was a fresh grave and forget about it. A couple of years later, no, there'd be fresh flowers put there, and that would be it.
Now, if we think about this in the big picture, if somebody didn't like something that was written on my tombstone, my gravestone, an epitaph that they particularly didn't agree with because I was associated with one group or another, or I did one thing or another, what gives anyone the right to touch anyone's gravestone, knock it over, move it, because they don't particularly care for something? I think that's horribly disrespectful.
Of course it is.
It is.
And hopefully the families will be able to get to the bottom of this, find out what's going on, and I'm sure that if they do, they would have you to thank.
I would hope somebody would protect that stone for the benefit, for nothing else but history.
Okay.
It saddens me to think that somebody one day will do that. It really does. Jesus died trying to bring the truth to the people of the gifts of the Spirit. That's all he taught. That's all he taught. He taught that God was within. Those preachers, those ministers that's listed on there, every one of them was a medium. Every one of them, even though it says at the top, burned at the stake, every one of them listed there were burned at the stake. Every one. I was told that, and I believe that. To me, that's gospel. Every one of them was burned at the stake, regardless of what these other people say.
I'm sure many people will be grateful to hear this, and hopefully our viewers will pass that on, because you never know who knows who as far as helping them to
The
prevent
first time I went there and discovered that, I sat down and cried. And I'm not ashamed of that. I sat down and cried. And I let the tears roll for those people that suffered in the fire.
I guess to imagine anyone or be witness to anyone burning would be a horrifying memory, to say the
I've
least.
always asked myself, which was the worst, burning in the fire or hanging on the cross until you die? Trying to bring the truth to the people. And the movie that I'm showing tomorrow and next day, free of charge, The Naked Truth. Once people see that, they will never forget it as long as they live.
No, we mentioned this on the last show. The Naked Truth
Naked Truth.
will be shown free of charge at Gifts of the Spirit Church,
Yeah.
March 22nd and 23rd, 10 a.m., 1 p.m., 4 p.m., and 7 p.m. And at the end of this telecast, there'll be a phone number that you can call
Yeah.
to get a seat assigned.
All I ask is that people come and see it, watch it, and think for themselves. That's all I ask people to do.
I don't see any harm in that.
And at the end of the show, or before this show's over tonight, I have decided to do something that I'm not supposed to do. I'm going to break my silence. And I am going to announce, and I don't care how far this signal goes, I'm going to say something that I'm not supposed to say.
Okay.
Because I have been affiliated with our government. This man knows that. And I'm going to break my silence on this television tonight.
Okay.
If I wind up in prison, bring me some black coffee.
For our viewers out there, we will stop at one point, and Reverend Hewitt will share what he needs to share with us. And during the telecast here, as normal, if you have any questions or suggestions, please do not hesitate to call. I can tell you from my personal experience that anything that Reverend Hewitt has ever shared with me, and many other lives that he's touched, has been nothing but helpful and true. This man is not a fake. So you'll do yourself a great favor by listening. Okay. With that, we'll go into the title of our show. We did pick a title tonight. The title is Arks. And for those of you out there who are curious what that means, we're going to talk about a couple of different arks throughout history that that we endeavor to make known the unknown about. Those arks are the Ark of the Covenant and Noah's Ark. We have a 1-hour show. We're about 15 minutes in. And if we can't get to all of it, we may just put it in a show at another time. But what we're going to endeavor to do first is start with the Ark of the Covenant. I am no expert in this area. My understanding of the Ark of the Covenant, is probably like most people's, that it was some very powerful religious icon that somehow is now lost. And I know I'm not going to do this any justice. That's why I have experts here. And it had what I thought was a very sacred and holy purpose and meaning throughout history. But I guess I was wrong. And I bet most of you will be wrong too when you will admit that you were wrong when you see the information that we'll be sharing with you tonight to uncover that. And what I'm going to start with, or who I'm going to start with, is Sidney Schwartz, our Bible expert. Sidney, what was the Ark of the Covenant?
Well, there's two stories. It depends which story you want. The traditional story basically is the Ark of the Covenant was a big box. And in the box, they put the Ten Commandments. When Moses came down from the mountain with the 2 tablets of testimony in his hand, he had been so energized that his face was radiating beams. His seventh seal was open. He was radiating beams and stuff. And so they had these really had the Ten Commandments, which the Hebrews thought was very holy, and to protect them, they put them into what they called the Ark of the Covenant, and that was kept in their meeting tent, in the most sacred part of it, the Holy of Holies, and supposedly that's where God was going to come to speak with the people. If you read in Exodus chapter 33, it talks about that Moses and God would have a conversation face to face as a man speaks with his friend. Well, they were in the part where this ark was supposed to be kept, and according to what's in the Bible, the Hebrews kind of felt that this was almost a direct connection to God. It was almost like a telephone, because as long as they had that with them, they would be protected. And they even went so far as to take it into battle with them, because they felt that God would be with them if they waged war against these people. And at one point, they lost the Ark of the Covenant, and it went to the enemy camp for a while, and the enemy was having all sorts of bad luck with this ark, and they finally returned it. That's what the traditional viewpoint of the Ark of the Covenant is. But the truth of the matter is quite different. And I'll turn it over to Reverend Hewitt, who really is chomping at the bit to tell us about it.
So we're not just going to go more into the biblical history.
No.
Okay.
Well, you must remember that we already talked to you about the trumpet that a medium uses.
Right.
They take ectoplasm and they make a voice box in the trumpet. Mm-hmm. He's already witnessed that. He's heard his own father speak to him through the trumpet and everything else. Well, we got to bring Jehovah in here. Now, Jehovah was not necessarily the nicest God you could hear to ever talk about. He was a God, but he was not a good God. He was a bad one.
I got to stop you right there. I apologize. Isn't Jehovah just a word that's interchanged for God? And depending on the religion that you follow, you'll say Jehovah or you'll say God?
Well, yes and no.
Okay, all right.
If God is in all of us, which is true, because there's another body in us. Remember, we're born with 2 bodies, okay? A physical body, a spiritual body. So therefore, God is in us, not in a piece of real estate in the sky. That's stupid. There is no God up there. God's in us. Because when this physical body dies, it gives birth to the spirit body. There's where God is, right? So, Jehovah was a god with a pregnant ego, and he wanted everybody to worship him. Now, this nonsense about those two cities that were supposed to have been sin cities that he destroyed,
He's talking about Sodom and Gomorrah.
Sodom and Gomorrah,
Okay.
they worshiped the intellect. Those were brilliant people. They were well advanced. And he wanted them to get down on their knees and worship him. And he told them to go to hell. They couldn't be bothered with him because he was sick. But people think that he was not advanced. In those days, they had aeroships. They flew on a highway of light. They didn't use fossil fuel that we have today. The governments in this world, they could fly on a highway of light if they wanted to, but they're not going to make any money flying on a highway of light, you know? They got to make money selling fossil fuel. So in those days, they were very advanced. So he circled over with his aeroship many times over those two cities, and they were right on that big, huge body of water. And they were very, very advanced. They got along, those two people in those two cities got along very well. And he gave them 3 warnings. If they didn't get down and worship him, he was going to destroy them. And the old bastard did. He destroyed them, every one of them. And he used it was like a laser gun.
But it was nuclear.
It was nuclear. He destroyed every one of them, and so powerful was the laser energy that he destroyed everything in the sea. This is why it's called Dead Sea today. Not even a minnow of any kind of fish will live there today. It's dead. Everything is dead. And how many thousands of years ago was that? You see? And he was so angered because they wouldn't get down and worship him, see? And then right after that, this man from another dimension, which turned out to be Joshua ben Joseph, he saw all this that was going on, and he decided to come back here and try to help the people, Joshua ben Joseph, which turned out to be Jesus. And he came back, and another 2 came back. And they came back to try to bring peace on this world, which he messed up. The world was a mess until he got here. I'm talking about Jehovah. So he hightailed it out of this system. He went to another planetary system beyond the North Star. He's coming back.
Okay, Carl.
He still lives.
You said so much here. I have to stop you for a minute. Now, so this box was used as a power center for
Power
Jehovah.
source. It was a voice box.
Okay. And he could use this to harm people with.
He had what is known as new beings. They were so used to it, it didn't bother them. Anybody else would touch it, they would die instantly.
You mean Nubians?
Yes.
Oh, interesting. Okay.
New beings
Okay.
were so used to it. They were used to the power, and so it didn't bother them. But anybody else would get near it. It is buried in the straits of, what did they tell me?
The plains of Sharon.
Plains of Sharon. It's way down deep in the earth, in the what is now known as the desert, and the plains of Sharon.
Do you know what part of the world that is?
That's in Israel.
In
It's
Israel.
outside, it's near the Mediterranean Sea.
Okay.
I was
somewhere.
in trance, I believe it was, and they told
Right.
you through me.
Right.
Just like that, you have that writing there. See, I never knew anything about that until I read it tonight. And the time that I was in trance, and whoever it was told him it was buried deep in the earth.
That was A1.
A1 told him it was buried very deep in the earth, near what was a spring there?
No, I'm not sure. He didn't say. It's just he said it was
And
buried in the desert.
It would be found. It would be found, but it would not have any more energy in it. It wouldn't be bothering anybody.
So did he bury it himself? Jehovah buried that himself?
Well, somebody buried it there.
Somebody took it from him.
Yeah.
So he wiped out people with nuclear blasts
Yeah.
Yes.
at that time.
Yeah.
In the Bible, it's kind of interesting that in Ezekiel chapter 16:49, it says, "Behold, this was the iniquity of Sodom, thy sister, pride." and it goes on. But the idea that they were so proud that they wouldn't worship Jehovah is kind of recorded in the Bible here. That it wasn't so much any immoral act that was going on in the city, but it had to do with the fact that they just wouldn't. They were beyond worshiping any particular god because they knew that God was within. They didn't think that God was an old man sitting in the sky someplace or a big spirit someplace that is sitting in the sky.
So now, again, when I hear the word Jehovah, I think that all the people who have founded religions around Jehovah, thinking that he was this great, wonderful being, are really in for an awakening.
Yes.
He was a god of retribution.
Yes. Some of this stuff is confusing to me because from what I've learned from the Jewish religion, when the name of God that's recorded in the Bible is kind of like Yahweh, but it's 4 letters that have no vowels. So what they did in English was they took the word for. When Jews say their prayers, they don't say Yahweh, they say Adonai, which means the Lord in Hebrew. And they took the vowels from Adonai and they stuck it in with the letters from Jehovah and came up with Yahweh and came up with this word Jehovah, which is like a hybrid word. Mm. But yet other spirit sources have told me that there was a God Jehovah and there was a God Yahweh, and there were two separate gods, and Yahweh was a good God while Jehovah was a God of retribution. So it's possible that this is like mythology that came into religions to kind of make you think that there's only one God, but there was actually 2.
So I can picture in my mind Nubians carrying this ark, which we've all seen that has poles going through
yes.
it. But I've also heard a story that it contained a whole bunch of different things. It contained the 10 Commandments, it contained some type of a staff, and it contained some other thing. I did a little bit of research myself on the internet just to try to have enough to know to ask questions about it, which I really didn't, and I found a lot of conflicts between what one person thought and the other person thought.
Well, if it contained a staff, it would have been Moses' rod, because that was the rod that he held over the Dead Sea, that made the Red Sea,
Okay.
that made it part, and that was the rod that he hit the rock with. That when he did dowsing, and the rock brought forth water.
Okay.
And so his rod was kind of important in the way the Bible's set up. Now, whether he really needed it or not, probably not.
All right.
But Jehovah himself used it as an amplifier for his own voice. Just as the Spirit uses the voice box in the cone, in the trumpet, he used it as an amplifier, and he used that, and the whole city, the whole place of Sodom and Gomorrah, all of the people could hear his voice.
I heard something to the effect, or read something to the effect, that Jehovah was beat by Yahweh.
Yahweh id and Yahweh id and the other one.
I don't know.
So there were battles ensuing between gods at this time on this planet.
He hightailed it out of this system.
But he's coming back.
He's coming back.
I think I'm going to ask you about him coming back later, when you
He's way here
share
now.
some of the information that you're going to share, because I have a feeling it might be tied.
But what I'm going to be sharing is not about him.
Right.
It's about our government and what's happening right now.
Because I'm sure our viewers have been thinking about, at the least, the current state of war that's ensuing on this planet.
Well, what I'm going to share is about the war and what's happened in the last 24 hours.
And we will stop a little bit short to talk about that segment. I also want our viewers to know that, believe it or not, a lot of what we do share on this show has a lot to do with why some of the things do happen on this planet and for the purposes that they do happen.
We are going to prove on this show why we have the name of this show is Making Known the Unknown. And I would suggest all the viewers getting the pad and pencil ready tonight. If they don't have their tape in the machine and recording this, you better get something to write with.
You heard that, viewers. Reverend Hewitt said it. Take notes, put a tape in the VCR. Don't mess around.
You got it. And write me in prison.
There is a little something I want to share, and I'm not quite sure if this is the right time to bring this in, but Sidney Schwartz and Reverend Carl Hewitt have both authored a book, and the book is called My First Encounter with an Angel, Revelations of Ancient Wisdom. This book can also be purchased from Gifts of the Spirit Church.
Yeah.
Yes.
And at the end of the show, that same phone number will link you up with this book. But this book was communicated to Reverend Hewitt from an entity, from a spirit entity by the name of AWAN, which is an acronym for Angel Without a Name. And this particular entity did not want to give a name because he did not want to become worshipped and have people follow him blindly like sheep. And Sidney Schwartz was the person who was made aware of this information in these meetings, or these while Carl was in trance. And that is the foundation for this first book that they have. There's a second one coming, not out yet. We will talk more about that later. But I was also very fortunate at one point to be part of one of these seances that was held when this entity, AWAN, came through Reverend Hewitt. And oddly enough, tonight I found something that was written from that seance that may have some relevance to what's going on in the world right now.
I was
And
shocked to read that.
I'm going to share that, or Reverend Hewitt, you could share that. It's
No,
up to you.
Share it.
Would you
You're
like me to
better
share
reader
that?
than I am.
Okay.
That's all fresh stuff for me.
I'm going to, this again came through Reverend Hewitt while he was in trance in April of 1999. And there's a lot of information in here at that time that was actually predicted, and we are seeing it and experiencing it right now on this planet. And so I just wanted to share a couple of these paragraphs with you, if I could. I'll jump in and I'll start with, in the days to come, many changes will take place on your planet. And again, this is this entity speaking through Carl, Reverend Hewitt. Okay.
In 1999.
In 1999. And many things will be changing in each one of your lives, and oftentimes you will wonder what is happening. Do not try to break it down the nitty-gritty as you understand that to be, of which to this day I do not understand what that means. But stay on course as you would term it and go with the flow. And when things happen to you that you feel are strange or weird, as you would say, and I hear that word all the time, it's like the tide that comes along and it sweeps you around the bend of the river, and it keeps you going and keeps you afloat. It is what we are doing with you, because all of you, even though you are small in number, you are part of what was prophesied for years as the meek. For truly the meek shall inherit the earth. I know people have heard this before. Religions have closed down the minds of the people all over your planet. And at this time there is a war raging in a far-off land, which is nothing in the world but a holy war. All wars that have ever been created on your planet have been holy wars. Interesting. None of you in this group have ever been involved as a leader in any war, because within yourself there is, in your terms, a part of your consciousness that would not think of creating a war to hurt other people, because they do not understand and believe that you were trying to teach them. And then it goes on for several paragraphs, but I will just wrap it up with this last paragraph. You are very fortunate at this time, my people, to be on the edge of a great change, a change that you could not believe that would ever happen on your planet. Because your world is in the term that you would call chaos at the present time. In your lifetime, and we are expressing this to all of you in your lifetime, you will see wonders in your skies. I just got goosebumps from reading that. You will see wonders on your planet. You will see sights and wonders all over your world. And this, my people, is like the signs and wonders before the great changes happen. It is likened to that of a woman who is about to bring forth a child into the world. And she goes through what is known as the labor pains. When you start seeing the sights and wonders, and just beyond that on the horizon, you will see the great changes that will take place. And you'll find yourself in places that you never dreamed that you would be there. But you are there for a reason, because it would be the safest place for you to go. And that's just a little bit that I wanted to share with our audience. And this is just a sample of the magnitude of the type of messages that Reverend Hewitt receives from time to time from Spirit. And as I said, and Sidney reminded me, about 4 years ago. And there's more to this and there's more detail. But I only wanted to put in as much as we could fit in this show. And something reminded me to bring it tonight, and I think that's pretty phenomenal.
That's all brand new to me, the less I read it.
Reverend Hewitt, if you would like to just share a little bit about why most of the time you're not aware of the information.
Not aware of it at all. A lot of times I've traveled, I've spent so much time in the woods hiking, and sometimes I sit down on a rock by myself, and I always dread of running. This may sound terrible, but I just dread, I don't want to see anybody. I don't want to run into another person, because it's like if I meet another person on the trail, it changes the vibration. And the one place that I really love to go is a place called Monhegan Island off the coast of Maine. And it's about, 15 miles off the coast. And it's an island that sits way up out of the water. And you go out there, and there's one little spot on the island that's inhabited, and the rest of it is wild. The deer will come right up and eat out of your hand. Remember that place? I said,
yes.
You've got to go there with me sometime. And we went there, and oh God, it was unbelievable. And we were out on this trail, and it started raining and drizzling, and we climbed up under this pine tree, and we were talking about the Bible, and we hadn't seen anybody all day. And finally, there was somebody poking along the trail. In order for them to see us, they'd have to look up underneath the tree where we were. This guy stopped, and he bent down and looked at us, and he said, "Oh, thank God, thank God." And he said, "I thought I heard God talking to me," because both of us were talking about the Bible. I thought that was God talking to me. We got the biggest laugh about that, because he hadn't seen anybody all day. And here he was, he heard these two people talking to him. It's a great place to go if you really want to unwind.
To get back to answer the question that you posed, when Reverend Hewitt goes into trance, his spirit leaves his body, his consciousness leaves, his mind leaves, and another spirit enters. Therefore, even though it's his body, it's a different spirit speaking, and his mind, and it doesn't retain anything that's said. So he has no idea. He goes out into the universe someplace and takes a nice trip and takes in the views, or I'm not even sure exactly where he goes to, but he comes back and he has no idea what's said. And then it's interesting, because even if he does decide to listen to the tape, he finds like he loses energy just listening to the tape. So lots of times he doesn't even bother listening. Sometimes I just brief him, about what was said briefly, and that's about it. So,
I'm exhausted.
Yeah.
Thank you for the clarification.
A real medium, a genuine medium, cannot possibly read all day. I don't care who they are. A psychic can sit on their keister and read. A genuine medium can't. I have handled the funeral at so many real mediums. He knows that. I tell them, all of them, be careful, you'll kill yourself. Some of the best mediums I've ever known, I've handled the funeral of many of them. Some of my best friends, I've handled the funeral. My beloved friend, Reverend Bingham, Reverend Ball. Reverend Ball lived out here in Canterbury. Wonderful medium. I tried my best to get her to stop. One of the best right here in this city, Calesta Rita, up here on the highest point in Norwich. My dear friend, she and I used to work together. She would never turn anybody away. She had such a big heart.
It's interesting that so many mediums, even though they do the work, they don't understand it either.
They don't understand.
They don't understand the energy that it takes, and really even how it works. Some of them, because some of them, it's a natural gift, just like with Reverend Hewitt. He was born with it. He's been doing it all his life. It's so second nature to him, and he was fortunate that his doctor really educated him about the energy drain that this work causes, so that he's been able to moderate the amount that he does.
Right. Now we talked about, to kind of get back a little bit to our topic about the Ark of the Covenant. I just have really one other question. It's been buried for so long. Is it that far down that it won't be able to be brought brought up again?
It will be found.
It will be found.
It will be found for this reason. It will be found for this reason. There will be someone, I don't know who that will be. And that leads me to my breaking my silence.
Okay, we're going to do it now. You want to do it
Well,
now?
I'm going to blend it in with. I'm going to blend it
Okay.
in with this. We'll
All
tie.
right.
We'll tie it in with
All right,
this.
go ahead.
And this is for the viewers out. There is such a thing as. This is one of the gifts of the Spirit which I have not talked about. And if you people, you skeptics out there, if you don't believe this, get on the web and check it out. There was a great gifted person by the name of David Morehouse. David Morehouse. He wrote the book Psychic Warrior. And he did remote viewing. Now, this is the way it works. Let's say this man right here was he had the gift of remote viewing. And he worked for the government, which is what David Morehouse did. And I worked for them a little while. But when they found out I was being ordained as a minister, they kicked me out.
The government you're talking about.
I'm talking about the government of the United States of America.
Okay. They didn't want you because you were a reverend.
I am divulging.
Okay.
I am divulging some information.
Okay.
They have some good people down there now. I'm not supposed to talk about this, but I'm going to talk about it. Some of you people probably wonder how they knew about where Hussein was. I'm telling you right now. It was through remote viewing.
What happens in remote viewing, Carl?
Huh?
Can you tell us what happens in remote viewing? Or maybe Sidney wants to do that
Well,
before you
there's
break
some
the
people
message.
that somebody asked me just before coming over here to the studio, how did they know? Well, there is a part of the government down in Washington that do this work.
Really?
They're involved in this work, and they don't want the public to know it. Well, God bless them. I'm going to tell them tonight. I'm going to tell the public tonight is watching this program, and I don't give a damn who knows it.
Okay.
They do remote viewing, and that is if this guy here had this ability, he would sit behind the desk here, and if I had a picture of somebody I wanted him to help me with, I'd hold this picture up, and he would concentrate on this picture. He would focus in on the picture, and then I would hand him a pair of blinders. He'd put them on. I'd drop the picture down on the face, and then I would have him take the blinders off, and I'd show him the picture again. Then I would have him put the blinders back on, and by this time he'd have a perfect picture in his mind of this person.
Okay.
And then I would ask him to keep his focus on that picture. And a few moments later, I would ask him, where is he? Where is he in his mind? You see, he's now searching all over the planet in his mind. He's trying to find this man in the picture. And he would probably describe, he's in a city somewhere, he would describe this city. The first thing I would ask him is he walking on the street? He would probably be walking on the street. He's looking for somebody, right? Mm-hmm. And he would probably say, he's on the street. Well, is the street paved or is it cobblestone? He'd probably say it was paved. Well, take a look around and see if you can see the street name. What language is it written in, you know? Well, he would be a little bit versed in, you know, the languages. Mm-hmm. He'd say, well, it looks like French to me. So we're getting down to brass tacks here. And learning something, aren't you, huh? Mm-hmm. And so we're getting down to it, and he says, it's French. Well, we keep right on going until he sees some numbers, and then he focuses in on a certain building. Then he's got a number on the building. In the meantime, all of this is being fed into a computer, and that's being fed through the computer system to perhaps some members of the CIA or the FBI, wherever the city is, right? So we find out that this one we're looking for maybe is some a very important person of the military that is being tortured, trying to get some important information out of him, you see? They surround the building and they find him there.
So these people are hired by the government,
Paid big money.
who are mediums, and they do remote
Absolutely.
viewing to help them find whatever it is
That's
they're
right.
looking for, whomever.
Absolutely.
If you think about it, Tina, since we've been doing this show, there's been 2 incidences where Reverend Hewitt has addressed members of the audience about what they were thinking.
Right.
And it's basically the same thing. The people who are doing remote viewing, if they're given a picture of a certain person, they can concentrate on it, tune into their vibration, and then start picking up information about it. You know, this is nothing new. It happened in biblical times. And while Reverend Hewitt was talking, I opened the Bible, and it almost opened to the exact page of it's titled here, The Aramean Ambush. It's the 6th chapter of the 2nd book of Kings. And I'll read you. And when the king of Aram was waging war on Israel, he would make plans with his servants to attack a particular place. But the man of God, which was a medium, would send word to the king of Israel, "Be careful, do not pass by this place, for Aram will attack here." So in other words, Israel had a medium who was on the watch and was tuning into the king of Aram and figuring out his war plans and advising his own army. So the king of Israel would send the word to the place in which the man of God had indicated and alert it. Then they would be on guard. This happened several times. Greatly disturbed over this, the king of Aram called together his officers. Will you not tell me, he asked them, who among us is for the king of Israel? In other words, he thought he had a spy in his chambers. And the response is very interesting. He says, "No one, my lord king," answered one of the officers. "The Israelite prophet Elisha can tell the king of Israel the very words you speak in your bedroom." So here you have it right here. Just as Reverend Hewitt has taught so many times, what happened in biblical times can still happen today. Here you had a medium who knew exactly what the king was saying in his own bedroom, where he was making war plans or wherever he was, and he knew exactly what was happening. So apparently this is happening in this very time.
You see, this is what bothers me. What bothers me is everything I teach, everything I preach is in this book. This is why they came and tried to arrest me at Myrtle Beach, South Carolina. This is why the preachers, ministers, rabbis, and all the clergy have been preaching against me, that it's the work of the devil. This is why they have been preaching this as far back as I can remember. This is why they came to my parents when I was a little boy, and they tried to find a reason to have a lobotomy operation on me and put me away in a hospital, in a sanitarium or someplace for the rest of my life. They did not want me out there teaching anybody the gifts of the Spirit. This is why they destroyed Jesus when he was only about 32 years old. They did not want the gifts of the Spirit taught to anybody. And as long as I have a breath in my body, I'm going to be teaching the gifts of the Spirit, because people have been misled, they have been lied to. And the Spirit people are the ones that name this program, Making Known the Unknown. And for those people that are watching this program and learning from this, God bless them. They're learning something. A little girl called me this week. I know she's a little girl, because she called up, she says, "I hear so many people talking about your program, your show," and she says, "I can't get over it," she says, and she says, "I want to come to your church," and we had a long talk, and she says, "Oh, where we live, we don't get the channel. We don't get a channel." I said, "Honey, you'll get it very soon, because I'm hearing other people talking about it too," and so she was very excited about it. She kept saying, "Oh, that's cool, that's cool, that's cool."
So now you talked about that the idea that Jesus dying was
Jesus
because he was
died
murdered.
That he died that horrible death by the priest. It was the priest that killed him.
Now, I also thought the Ark of the Covenant was used in one respect because the people, the Hebrew people, didn't follow or do what they were supposed to do, and they were considered to have taken the wrong path or the wrong course, and that I've seen as a justification why people were wiped out.
Yes.
Sort of like using the same image of Jesus to try to gain some power, some control. But in fact, the people hadn't done anything. It was really a very evil God that did that.
Right.
So, Carl, have you finished sharing what you wanted to share, or were you onto something else? Did you want to tell us more about you personally with respect to the government?
These poor people running this station here, they would all be laying on the floor, lack of nutrition and all of that business. They don't have the energy. I could keep going. They'd have to come here and feed me intravenously. If I ever got started, I'd never shut up. You better keep talking. They'll throw the switches.
I thought that you had a little bit more to share.
A little bit more.
Just about with respect to a very important role that maybe you play right now. I don't know if you can share that a little bit about that.
I'm trying my very best to get across to the people the truth.
Okay.
I don't want to see people misled. Many years ago, quite a few years ago, I was told by somebody in the other dimension what was going to happen, and it has happened to the letter. About the scandal on the churches, it's happened to the letter. There's a few people I know, I've told them, and they said, you shouldn't start rumors like that. I said, it's not a rumor. This is not a rumor. This is coming from a side of life that very few people know anything about. I says, there are dimensions beyond this that we will go to. I don't care who you are or what you've done, you will continue living after this life.
And because of how accurate you are a resource for many different people and places for information.
I don't want to see people misled.
Okay.
But I see it all the time.
All right.
I see it all the time. And to think that the way I was treated as a kid and what they almost did to me, and recently when Spirit told me how you were selected, how the people in this studio were selected to work with you, how this man was told about 30 years ago when they told me that this Jew would come into my life, you know, and I said, I want no Jew in my life.
See, the religious leaders, they understand that the Bible is really a book of psychic history. You could use the term psychic history, you could call it psychic science, you can call it mediumship, you can call it the gifts of the Spirit. It's all one and the same. You take that out of that book and you just have a bunch of man-made laws, and most of you'd have a real thin book. You wouldn't have a thick one like this. It's all psychic history, and they don't want the people to understand the psychic nature of this book. Just like Reverend Hewitt can tell you, but right here in Norwich, when they used to have the mental hospital here, he visited a woman who was put away because she was a medium, simply because that was the only thing she ever did.
So right now, mediums have helped our government find Saddam Hussein and anybody and everybody else who's out there who needs to be found.
This is why they knew exactly where he was.
But yet they want to take down a tombstone for mediums who were burned at the stake.
Right.
Now you people watching, now you know the secret. It was done through remote viewing.
Okay. Sidney, I don't think we're going to have time for Noah's Ark, but I'm sure we can fit it in under another show.
No problem.
I was just noticing that you had brought just a little bit of information out of the Bible with respect to war. And I didn't know if we only have a couple minutes left, you could sort of fit that in before we wrap up the show, or find a way to do that.
Well, okay. In Deuteronomy chapter 20, It deals with Jehovah talking to the people, saying that it's okay to go to war. I'm not going to bother reading the whole thing. If those of you who really want to look it up can, but basically it says that if a person when your army goes to conquer a city, and if they surrender, then you just go in there and enslave the people, and that's it. But if they fight you, then you go in and you kill all the men and just take everything, and you're allowed to steal and rape and do whatever you want.
Oh, so even the Bible really kind of condones war, whatever it takes.
Exactly.
Okay. I think that's all we have time for in this show.
Okay.
So we're going to wrap it up here. I want to remind everybody, on March 22nd and 23rd, The Naked Truth will be airing at Gifts of the Spirit Church, 10 a.m., 1 p.m., 4 p.m., and 7 p.m. Call the number at the end of the show to get your spot. Also, call to check out the book, My First Encounter with an Angel, Revelations of Ancient Wisdom. You're also looking at the email address on screen that you can write to, and we'll answer your questions there. I think that's all I have for today. I want to thank my panel of experts, Sidney Schwartz and Reverend Hewitt. And thank you, viewers. We'll see you next time. Be well.